A couple years in 2017, I think the the governor of Alabama passed in a law, a really cool law that we all were like really down for. Essentially, it said that agencies that were adopting children out could refuse adoptive parents, potentially adoptive parents, for any reason whatsoever. Um, and when this happened, I think we all, I don't want to speak for everybody else in the show, but for me, it was very much thinking, okay, that means queer parents aren't going to be able to adopt same sex couples are going to have big problems. And certainly that's a big problem. But um, uh, a lot of Elena Browning, um, she and her husband have a 5-year-old daughter and they want to adopt a sibling for her. And they're Alabama, sorry about my Chicago accent, they're Alabama residents. And I'm so sorry, it's such an early accent. And she reached out to at least a couple of places and asked if the fact that she was not religious would harm her chances of adopting. So she had been, according to this article, WKRG, she'd been up front. She wanted to be sure from the agency that being quote unquote secular wouldn't be taking her out of the running of adopting children. They said, "What do you mean by secular?" And she said that she's atheist. And the response was, "I'm sorry, we could not work with you. We are not specific about one's faith, but the biological families that we work with do request that our adoptive families have spiritual life." Browning kind of asked, saying, "Do you know of anybody who can help me?" And this person said, "I don't know of an agency in Alabama who would accept your application. Perhaps an adoption facilitator out of state. I don't know of one, however." So what we're looking at now is, from what I can tell, a completely appropriate family who wants to adopt children. They have a child already, want to adopt a sibling. And from what I can see, the only barrier between them and adopting a child is that she's not religious. And I can't speak for anybody else, but I'm kind of shocked. I truly am a little bit surprised. I knew there was going to be the whole we like Christian families better, but I don't know a lot about like children in the United States, but I know we don't have so many parents looking to adopt and so few children who are in need of homes that we should discount families who want to take kids in based on a nonsense bullshit reason. Um, and I mean, the heartbreaking thing about this story is this woman has no recourse. So she is just a person who wants to take in a kid who doesn't have a family who takes care of them, and they can't because they're atheists. And I don't know, that doesn't sound super Christian to me. What do you guys think? Do you think that's a super Christian thing to do? Do you think Jesus would be like, "No, definitely that kid shouldn't have a stable home. I hate atheists so much. Kids are terrible."
I think this story is a perfect one to follow on from the first one because to me, this is kind of a double story because you've got the core of the story, which is obviously the hard part, which shouldn't be happening. But also, when we were talking in the last segment about people not quite understanding things, this came across to me overwhelmingly in this story because the woman from the kind of adoption agency seemed really confused. She didn't seem to be able to grasp the idea, and she was quite contradictory. And that contradiction, I don't think, came from a place of malice with her. I think it came from a place of genuine confusion that she didn't quite understand. And when you started to pull the layers away from the reasoning, that became, to me, quite obvious. And
Richard, can I give a quote from the adoption agency that they said 99% of mothers request some kind of religion for the adoptive home, which to me reeks of bullshit. This reeks of a person who's never asked that question before in their entire life.
Yeah, I agree, and that's kind of my point, is that the fact that when you actually start pulling the layers away, that becomes obvious that she's not been asked the question and she's not even thought about it before. And being presented with this, the primary reason she gave, I think, was that of the birth mother.
Right.
That the birth mother had requested that the child in question be given to a religious family. But when you
Right.
started unraveling it didn't make any sense, because then she started saying things like, as you quoted earlier, she didn't know of any other adoption agencies which would allow this. And and she was talking about Muslim families and things, and it just seemed to be a case that she'd not thought about it, and she was trying to give answers on the fly, and that's how it came across to me. And I felt sorry for the woman from the adoption agency in this. She was wrong, and I'm not trying to sympathize with her on that in that regard, but it's another case of where education is necessary, and I'm never going to stop backing on about education. It's another case where education is necessary.
That's why you're our resident scholar.
Yeah.
Richard, I'm
And
trying to tell you. Go ahead, Teo.
I love how Richard is so fixed in education, because I totally agree with that. And at the same time, I'm so fixed on the harms of religion, because this thing right here, this is the perfect example of how harmful religions are. You're going to be discriminated only because you don't have a religion. And this is a woman who is not being, as you said, not discriminated because she had a record, not discriminated because she cannot feed the kid. She, as we mentioned, or you mentioned already, she has other children, so she can do this. She knows how to do it. She has had other foster children in past. Right. She is only being discriminated, and this is discrimination because she's not religion. She's not religious. She's not a religious person. She's not a religion either. She's a person. Come on. And yeah, of course, it had to be freaking Alabama, which for some reason keeps popping up on our articles always. Alabama, Texas, Florida. And sorry, I had to mention this. Recently in the previous episode, I read a joke, which is more regressive, Texas, Alabama, or Florida? Yes. So it's terrible. And as Richard mentioned, it's very sad how the person is just the person from the adoption agency, she's just rejecting this other person because of ignorance. And you know what, this woman who is being interviewed, who is telling her story about how she was rejected, she's an angel. She's so meaning a very good person, not the biblical ones that kill people. She's such a great and awesome person. It's heartbreaking, because she even decided not to fake being a religious person, because she could have said, oh yeah, no, I'm totally fundamentalist because you love those. No, she decided that she's not going to do that, because that is not the right thing to do, and she keeps trying to do this the right way, which sadly, as we see, it's not working for her.
Well, basically, piggybacking on what you just said, I'm just going to read a part of the article that we're referencing, specifically about this woman being very truthful. Browning specifically was being very truthful about who she was, what she not believed in, and still expressed her desire to actually be able to adopt. She was asked by the agency whether being secular would automatically take them out of the running for an adoption. And she said, define secular. This is what Browning asked. And then atheist agnostic, she replied. The response was stark. I am sorry, the agency said. We could not work with you. We are not specific about one's faith, but the biological families that we work with do request that our adoptive families have a spiritual life. So I have a question for the panel. What the fuck is a spiritual life? Go.
Literally just saying you believe in anything. Truly, I think people just want you to say, there are things that I can't see, I still believe in them, and that makes me a good person. I don't know how else to say it. Just the act of having faith in anything is a good thing for these people. So if I said I was a flat earther, like, like that's a dumb belief that's based in nothing. But so is Christianity.
But 2% of people in the world would believe with you.
Oh, for
You
real?
can find 2% of people in the world who believe a lot of terrible shit. Like, maybe we shouldn't like base our life on what 2% of people think.
That's still a lot of people.
It is a lot. It is a lot of people.
Yeah, that is. Teo?
Sadly, it is. No, I guess being religious or having a spiritual life means believing stupid stuff related to magic and, guys who watch you masturbate for some reason. And I'm going to hell if you don't do what this magical homicidal maniac is telling you to do. That's as religious as spiritual as you can go, according to me.
Indeed, indeed. What about you? What the fuck is spiritual, Richard?
Mr.
What
Scholar?
the fuck is spiritual? Indeed, I don't know. I tend to agree that it's a case of if they came along and said they were Taoist, I think they'd say, oh yeah, that's fine. You can. It doesn't matter that Taoism, it's in scriptural Taoism at least, that the physical body can live forever and be immortal, and with certain magical rituals, and there's no god to speak of. That doesn't matter as long as you're practicing something spiritual, and we can see that you're good. It seems very, very weird to me. Very, very strange.
Should I put that I'm a deist? Like, would that be helpful for them?
Yeah.
Like, truly, like, where is the line of
God.
what is an acceptable religion? All of
Yeah.
our founding fathers were deists, but like, I don't think if I described God as a great watchmaker, the adoption agency would be like, yeah, you're our kind of Christian. Like, I don't know. Go ahead, Richard.
Go ahead, Rich.
This seems to me as well, because I don't know if any of you picked up on this, but it actually said in the article that this adoption agency is quite happy to allow same-sex couples to adopt.
Mhm. And they had
that's...
a brown couple once. Can you believe it? She bragged about it.
I know, and I think that brings me on to my kind of closing statements on this, and this might be an unpopular view here. But I think the woman from the adoption agency is a victim in this, as well as other people. I think, as well as the lady trying to adopt. This story to me has got layers and layers and layers of victims. It's got victims of ignorance, victims of indoctrination, victims of poor lawmaking, victims of ill thought out rules. And it's easy to come down on one side of the argument, but I think this is something where if you start peeling the layers away, it's another case of there's a wider picture here that needs addressing.
Yeah, I agree with that, Richard. And I know that like we're going to have to move on, but I do want to say this one thing that I wrote in my notes that specifically, Jessica, you mentioned the law that was signed into the legislation or the bill that was signed into law in 2017 by the governor in Alabama, who said that discrimination in the adoption process is not a new discussion in Alabama. But the year Browning's biological child was born, Governor Kay Ivey signed a law allowing private adoption agencies to turn away adoptive parents for religious reasons, including opposition to same-sex marriage. And something like this, I would love to see. I know this is not a call to action. This is just something that I would like to see. I would like to see groups like FFRF, like Freedom from Religion Foundation, be to look into this, because this is blatantly a law that is against the First Amendment of separation of church and state, or religion and government. You know, the very thing that we are promoting that we want. And I think that that's something that even theists should want, because and I'm just telling you, theists, that if you have a certain belief or practice that you want to do, you don't want that to be encumbered by what the government says that what you can and cannot do. Just like us on the other side who want to be able to live our lives secularly if we want, or if we choose, don't want theistical ideologies to rule our lives, to actually encumber the things that we want, and or even how to live our lives. And I agree with what the Satanist temple said previously with the first segment, that rules concerning discrimination should not be limited to only public institutions. Private institutions should not get a loophole when blatantly involved with discriminatory practices. Like the previous article said, this should not be unanswered. And on that note, I think it's time to take a break, y'all. Everybody breathe. You know, Richard, you're into meditation. You should get that prana breathing. You should have led us all into the breathing thing.
I was breathing so subtly, you didn't even notice it.
Oh,
we
look
all
at
thought you were
you.
dead.
It has been noted quite often.